Hi guys, today I'm going to be doing a lens review of the Sigma 150 to 600mm f5 to 6.3 sport lens. And I'm going to start right now. Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and if it is the very first time to this channel and you want to learn all about Photoshop, Lightroom and everything photography related, start now by subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss anything. So in this video guys, I'm going to be doing a lens review of the Sigma 150 to 600mm f5 to 6.3 sport lens. Now I've already done a review of the contemporary version of this lens, so I'll make sure to link that in the description, but today it's all going to be about the sports version. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this review down into 5 separate parts to really work out if this very lens is worth a spot in your camera bag. But first, let's talk a little bit about the unboxing experience and what accessories you get inside the box. So, without further ado guys, let's get started. So just before I start talking about the build quality of this lens, I just wanted to talk about the unboxing experience and what lens accessories you get inside the box. So with this lens, you get a front and rear lens cap with a very large premium plastic lens hood. You also get an incredibly well-made waterproof padded lens bag. This lens bag also has a shoulder strap, which means you can use this bag when out in location. Now because of the size of this lens doesn't necessarily fit in all camera bags. So having a really nice lens bag is really handy, especially if you are bringing it out on location. So overall, I was really happy with the build quality of the lens accessories and the lens bag that comes with this lens inside the box. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the build quality of this lens. Now, so far I've tested quite a few Sigma lenses and all of them have really lived up to expectation, especially when it comes to build quality. And this lens, I must say, is no exception. Made out of a full body metal construction with 2 rubberized rings. One is a focus ring and the other is the zoom ring. The focus ring is incredibly smooth and well damped, and it's really easy to change the focus. But on the other hand, the zoom ring is actually quite heavy and it takes a lot of pressure to change the focal distance. But again, this is just due to the size of the lens. The lens also has weather sealing, which is great if you're planning on using it either in a wet or a dusty environment. This lens also has 4 heavy-duty buttons that can be found on the left-hand side right near the non-removable lens collar. These buttons are also weather sealed, which allows you to change different aspects of the lens from autofocus to manual focus. It also has a focus limiter and custom image stabilization options. So when I first picked this lens up, I was really surprised with the build quality. Sigma really do know how to make a good quality lens, and it really does show with this 150 to 600mm. So apart from the really heavy zoom ring, this lens excelled in almost every aspect of the build quality. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10 for build quality. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is the image quality of this lens. So this lens is a variable aperture zoom lens, meaning the more you zoom, the more the aperture changes. Now this lens has a variable aperture from f5 at 150mm to f6.3 at 600mm, meaning the more you zoom in, the less light reaches the sensor. Now this is important if you're zooming continuously in and out, so I would recommend keeping the lens at a constant minimum aperture of 6.3, so the light doesn't change when you're zooming either in or out. So I went to my local deer park in Woburn to take some photos of the deer. At 150mm, I found that sometimes the photos were quite soft, but at 200mm or more, the sharpness increased, and at 600mm, it was unbelievably sharp through the entire image frame. All of the photos that you can see here I shot at f6.3. So here are some test shots. This particular photo was taken at 6.3 aperture at 150mm. And if we go ahead and zoom in, you can see that it is incredibly sharp through the entire focal range. But if you wanted a sharper image, I would recommend using this lens at 600mm. So if we go ahead and zoom in to 600mm, again, this was shot at f6.3, you can see how sharp this lens truly is. And I must say, I was really surprised with the quality, especially at 600mm at 6.3. Now, because of the super mega zoom aspect of this lens, you could use this lens for a wide variety of different types of photography. A good example of this would be using this lens for air shows. So how does this lens handle lens flaring in bright environments? So with this lens, you get a good quality lens hood, which is great for cutting down the amount of flaring. But if you did point this lens directly into the sun, you will find that it does suffer from quite bad lens flaring. But again, this is just due to the amount of lens elements that this lens has. So I would highly recommend using either a circular polarizer filter or using a lens hood, which is included with this lens, especially in bright sunny conditions. So how does this lens handle distortion and vignetting? Now, because of the super mega zoom aspect of this lens does not suffer from any barrel or pincushion distortion, which is great. And because of the high aperture aspect of this lens, vignetting doesn't seem to be a problem, especially in the photos that I took. The only downside to this lens is the high aperture, which is difficult to create good looking background blur or bokeh. But if you did zoom in at 600mm, you could use the compression of this lens to break the subject away from the background. Now, with the images that I took, I did notice very little colour fringing and chromatic aberration, which is good to see, especially at 600mm. So overall, I was pleasantly surprised with the image quality of this lens, especially if you compare it to the Canon or Nikon super mega zoom lenses out there, especially as they're a lot more money. And I did not notice a massive difference in image quality. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it a 9 out of 10 for image quality. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is the size and weight of this lens. So this lens is by far the biggest and heaviest lens I've tested, coming in at a whopping 2.86 kilograms or 6.31 pounds in the US. And at its smallest size, this lens is almost 30 centimeters long or 12 inches. So you're going to need a very large camera bag if you are wanting to bring this lens with you. Now, of course, you can always hand hold this lens, but when I was taking photos at Woburn, I used a monopod, and this is just due to the heavy weight of this lens. The monopod did help me keep the lens more stable, especially in low light conditions. Now, if you compare this lens to the Sigma contemporary version of this lens is a lot heavier, even though it has the same focal distance and aperture. The Sigma 150 to 600mm f5 to 6.3 contemporary version comes in at just 1.9 kilos, almost 1 kilogram less than the Sigma Sport lens that I have here. This lens also has a very large front element, coming in at a whopping 105mm, which is by far one of the largest front elements from any lens that I have tested, which means it's going to be very expensive and very difficult to find either a UV or circular polarizer filter, so do take that into consideration. But if you compare it to any other super mega zoom lenses that either Canon, Nikon or Sony make, this lens is actually quite compact, especially if you compare it to any of the prime lenses out there with similar focal distance. But again, with any type of zoom lens like this, is always going to be heavier than other lenses on the market. But if you did want a lighter super mega zoom lens than this, I would highly recommend using the Sigma contemporary version. So for that reason, I'm only going to be giving this a 6 out of 10, as the contemporary version is smaller and lighter than this lens. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is the focus motor that this lens has. So this lens has an upgraded focus motor compared to the Sigma 150 to 600mm contemporary version. Although I would say both lenses are still incredibly quick to focus, it's just that this sport lens is a lot quicker. So if you are after a quick focusing super mega zoom lens, then you can't go wrong with this Sigma Sport lens. So this lens has two intelligent image stabilization options. Option 1 is just for general purpose photography. Option 2 is more designed for when you're using it for panning. So for instance, if you're using this lens for either motorsport, air shows or moving wildlife. Option 2 provides more successful image stabilization when you're either panning either horizontally or vertically, and it helps you with either panning or tracking subjects. So what is this lens like for video? Well, this lens isn't quiet, especially when you're either focusing or using the image stabilization. So I wouldn't recommend using the internal microphone of your camera. I would recommend either using a wireless microphone or a shotgun microphone. These types of microphones will help you reduce the amount of clicking and whirring sound that this image stabilization makes, or if you're changing your focus distance. Overall, I was really impressed with how quick and precise the focus motor worked and the quality of the image stabilization, especially if you compare it to the contemporary version of this lens. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10 for focus motor control. And last but most importantly is the price. And coming in at £1,249, this lens is incredibly good value for money, especially if you compare it to the owned brand Canon, Nikon or Sony super mega zoom lenses. The Canon RF 100 to 500mm f4.5 to 7.1 L lens comes in at £2,899. The Nikon 500mm f5.6 image stabilized prime lens comes in at a whopping £3,499, and the Sony 200 to 600mm f5.6 to 6.3 image stabilized mega zoom lens comes in at £1,699. And by far the most expensive lens to date is the 600mm Canon f4 image stabilized lens, which comes in at a whopping £13,096. So this Sigma lens offers great value for money, especially if you compare it to the other super mega zoom lenses out there. A massive saving, especially if you compare it to the prime lenses on the market. So the only lens that is cheaper than this that I would say is comparable is the contemporary version, the Sigma 150 to 600mm contemporary lens, coming in at just £749. So if you're more budget orientated, then I would say the contemporary lens is better value for money for you. The only downside to this lens, price-wise, is the size of the front element. With a filter thread of 105mm, there is not a lot of options when it comes to either buying either a UV filter or a circular polarizer filter. The cheapest UV filter I found was an own brand Sigma 105mm UV filter, which comes in a whopping £159.95. And if you wanted to buy a cheap circular polarizer filter, the cheapest one I could find was a Lee 105mm filter, coming in at £209. Do bear that in mind, that if you are after a UV filter to protect the front element, you are going to have to save a little bit of money, as it is an expensive purchase. So overall, I was pleasantly surprised with the build quality, image quality and focus motor of this lens. And with the amazing price of just £1,249, this lens offers great value for money. So for that reason, I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10 for price. Brilliant, and there we go guys. So that is my lens review of the Sigma 150 to 600mm f5 to 6.3 sport lens. And with a respectable score of 40 out of 50, this is a highly recommended lens, especially if you are after a professional look to your photos with the amazing sharpness that this lens offers. I must say, this is by far one of a kind. It has an amazing super mega zoom lens capabilities, but with a small, slender body, especially if you compare it to any of the Canon, Nikon or Sony equivalent prime lenses that are out there that are a lot more money than this Sigma. Again guys, if you want to like, comment and subscribe to my channel, it really does help my channel grow. Also, if you want to hit the bell notification so you don't miss any of my latest content. But until next time guys, keep creating.